Elena Volkov crouched behind the crumbling concrete wall, her breathing steady despite the chaos erupting around her. The sound of gunfire echoed through the abandoned factory district as her unit advanced toward their target. At 24, she had already earned a reputation as one of the most skilled marksmen in her military division. But today felt different. Something in the air made her fingers tighten around her rifle. Her commander, Captain Morrison, signaled for the team to move forward. Elena adjusted her scope and scanned the area ahead. Through the crosshairs, she could see enemy positions scattered across the industrial complex. The mission was supposed to be straightforward: infiltrate the facility, secure the intelligence, and extract before reinforcements arrived. But intelligence reports had been wrong before. "Sniper 1, do you have visual on the target building?" Morrison's voice crackled through her earpiece. Elena swept her scope across the concrete structures ahead. The main building stood 3 stories high, its windows blown out from previous conflicts. She could see movement on the second floor, shadows passing behind broken glass. Affirmative. Count at least 6 hostiles on level 2, possibly more on the ground floor. The team consisted of 8 soldiers, each with specialized skills. Elena served as their overwatch, positioned to provide cover and eliminate high-value targets from distance. She had saved her teammates countless times with precisely placed shots, earning their trust and respect. They called her the Ghost because enemies never saw her coming. As Morrison led the assault team toward the building, Elena repositioned herself on higher ground. She climbed to the roof of an adjacent warehouse, giving her a clear view of the entire area. From this vantage point, she could protect her team and control the battlefield. Her rifle, a custom-modified piece she had worked on for months, felt like an extension of her body. The first shots rang out as her team breached the building. Elena immediately identified 3 enemy combatants attempting to flank her squad from the eastern approach. Her first shot dropped the lead hostile before he could raise his weapon. The second and third fell in quick succession, their plans disrupted before they could execute their ambush. "Nice work, Ghost," came Morrison's voice. "Keep us covered while we search the building." Elena continued her scan, methodically checking every possible threat vector. She noticed movement in a building 2 blocks away, someone setting up what looked like a heavy weapon. Before the enemy sniper could acquire a target, Elena's bullet found its mark. The threat was eliminated before her team even knew it existed. 20 minutes into the operation, everything began to unravel. Intelligence had been catastrophically wrong. Instead of facing a small group of insurgents, Elena's team had walked into a carefully prepared trap. Enemy reinforcements poured in from 3 directions, far more than the expected resistance. "We've got heavy contact on all sides." Morrison's voice was tense. "Ghost, we need immediate support on R6. Elena swiveled her position and saw at least 20 hostiles approaching her team's rear position. She began engaging targets rapidly, but there were too many. For every enemy she dropped, 2 more seemed to take their place. Her ammunition was running low and the enemy was adapting to her position. "Morrison, you've got a technical vehicle approaching from the north," Elena reported, spotting an armed truck racing toward the building. She aimed for the driver, but the vehicle swerved at the last moment. Her shot shattered the windshield but didn't stop the truck. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Enemy fire was concentrating on Elena's position as they had finally located her. Concrete chips exploded around her as bullets struck the roof. She had to move, but doing so would leave her team exposed. "Ghost, we're taking heavy casualties," Morrison's voice was strained. "We need to extract immediately." Elena provided covering fire as her team began their fighting withdrawal from the building. She could see 3 of her teammates had been wounded, slowing their movement. The enemy was closing in fast and extraction vehicles were still 10 minutes away. "I can hold them here," Elena transmitted. "Get the wounded to the rally point." "Negative, Ghost. We extract together or not at all." But Elena could see what Morrison couldn't from his position. Enemy reinforcements were arriving in vehicles, and snipers were setting up in multiple buildings. If her team tried to carry the wounded while fighting through that gauntlet, none of them would survive. She made a decision that would haunt her for months to come. "Morrison, trust me. Get them out. I'll buy you the time you need." Elena began engaging the enemy with everything she had. She moved constantly across the rooftop, changing positions to avoid return fire while maintaining pressure on the hostiles below. Her shots were precise and devastating. each one carefully calculated to maximize the confusion and fear among enemy ranks. The last thing she heard before her radio went silent was Morrison's voice. "Ghost, we're at the extraction point." "Where are you?" By then, Elena was surrounded. Her ammunition was nearly exhausted, and enemy forces had sealed off every escape route. She had bought her team the time they needed to escape, but now she faced the consequences of her sacrifice. As enemy soldiers stormed the building where she had made her last stand, Elena prepared for whatever came next. She had saved her team, but her war was far from over. In the distance, she could hear the extraction helicopters carrying her friends to safety. It was a sound she would remember during the dark months ahead. The last thing Elena saw before everything went black was the face of an enemy commander, smiling as his men surrounded her position. She had fallen into their hands, but she had accomplished her mission. Her team was safe, and that was all that mattered. What Elena didn't know was that her capture would set in motion a chain of events that would eventually bring her back to change the course of an even larger battle. Her war was just beginning. The concrete cell measured 8 feet by 6 feet, with a single barred window that let in barely enough light to distinguish day from night. Elena had been counting days by scratching marks into the wall with a loose piece of metal she had found. By her count, she had been imprisoned for 47 days, though time seemed to move differently in this place. Commander Kozlov visited her cell every few days, always with the same questions. He was a tall man with pale eyes and a scar running from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. His English was precise, calculated like everything else about him. He wanted information about troop movements, communication codes, and extraction protocols. Elena gave him nothing but her name, rank, and service number. "You are wasting your talents here," Kozlov said during one of his visits, pulling up a metal chair to sit across from her. "Your shooting skills are remarkable. I have seen the reports from the factory district. 13 confirmed kills in 20 minutes. Most impressive." Elena stared at the wall behind him, refusing to meet his eyes. She had learned that any reaction, even anger, gave him something to work with. Silence was her only weapon now. "Your team abandoned you," he continued, his voice carrying false sympathy. "They left you behind to save themselves. Why do you protect people who cared so little for your life?" The words stung because part of her wondered if they were true. Had Morrison really done everything possible to extract her? Could they have found another way? But she pushed these thoughts aside. She had made the choice to stay behind. Her team had followed her recommendation because they trusted her judgment. The physical conditions were deliberately harsh. Food came once a day, usually a thin soup and a piece of stale bread. The cell was either too hot or too cold, depending on the season. Elena used the time to maintain her physical conditioning as much as possible in the confined space. Push-ups, sit-ups, mental exercises to keep her mind sharp. During her 3rd week in captivity, Elena began to notice patterns in the guard rotations and facility operations. The complex was larger than she had initially realized, with multiple buildings connected by underground tunnels. She could hear vehicles coming and going at regular intervals, suggesting this was an active military installation rather than just a prison. Through her small window, Elena could see part of a training area where enemy soldiers practiced combat maneuvers. She studied their techniques, equipment, and procedures with professional interest. Even in captivity, she remained a soldier, gathering intelligence that might prove useful later. The interrogations became more sophisticated over time. Kozlov brought in specialists who tried psychological techniques, playing recordings of what they claimed were her teammates discussing her capture. The voices sounded convincing, but Elena detected subtle inconsistencies that revealed them as fabrications. "Your government has forgotten you," one interrogator told her. "No rescue attempts, no prisoner exchanges. You are expendable to them." Elena knew this was likely true. Deep cover operatives like herself were considered acceptable losses. The mission always came first. But she also knew that Morrison and her team would never stop trying to find her, even if official channels had written her off. During her 8th week of imprisonment, Elena witnessed something that changed her perspective on the entire conflict. Through her window, she saw a convoy of trucks arriving at the facility. When the cargo doors opened, she realized they contained civilians, including women and children. These people were not soldiers or combatants, but refugees or prisoners taken from nearby villages. The sight filled Elena with cold rage. This was not just a military conflict anymore. These people were targeting innocent civilians, using them for forced labor or worse. She watched guards separate families, sending them to different parts of the complex. The sounds of crying children echoed across the courtyard. That night, Elena made a new plan. Escape was no longer just about her own survival or returning to her unit. She had a duty to help those civilian prisoners if possible. But first, she needed to find a way out of her cell. Elena had been studying the lock mechanism on her door during the brief moments when guards brought food. It was an older design, operated by a large key that the guards wore on their belts. She had also noticed that one particular guard, a young man who seemed nervous and inexperienced, sometimes left his keyring partially visible when he set down her food tray. The opportunity came during her 9th week. The nervous guard was working alone during a shift change, probably covering for someone else. When he brought her evening meal, Elena feigned illness, doubling over and making retching sounds. When he moved closer to investigate, she grabbed his wrist and applied a pressure point technique that caused him to drop the keys. Before he could call for help, Elena had unlocked her cell and disabled him with a sleeper hold she had learned in Special Forces training. She dragged his unconscious body into her cell and took his uniform, weapon, and identification card. The man was roughly her size, and in the dim lighting of the facility corridors she might pass for him at a distance. Elena's training kicked in as she moved through the complex. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate. She avoided areas with multiple guards and used service corridors whenever possible. Her goal was to reach the communication center and contact her unit. But she also wanted to assess the civilian prisoners' situation. She found the detention area where families were being held. The conditions were even worse than her own cell had been. Children huddled with their parents in overcrowded rooms with no proper ventilation or sanitation. Elena realized that any escape attempt would have to include these people, making her mission exponentially more difficult. In the communications center, Elena discovered intelligence that made her blood run cold. The facility was not just a prison and training center. It was the headquarters for a major offensive planned against her own forces. Maps showed troop movements, supply routes, and target priorities. The enemy was planning to overrun 3 Allied bases simultaneously, using the civilians as human shields to prevent effective resistance. Elena photographed everything she could with a camera she found in the communications room. This intelligence was too important to risk losing if her escape failed. She hid the memory card in her boot, knowing it might be the only way to warn her people about the coming attack. As she prepared to leave the communications center, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Someone had discovered the unconscious guard. Elena heard boots running in the corridors and shouted orders in multiple languages. Her window of opportunity was closing rapidly. Instead of trying to escape immediately, Elena made another decision that surprised even her. She headed toward the detention area where the civilians were held. If she was going to die here, she would at least try to give these innocent people a chance at freedom. The choice would cost her any realistic hope of escape, but Elena had never been one to abandon people who needed her help. As she ran through the corridors toward an uncertain fate, she could only hope that somehow, someday, she would have the chance to use the intelligence she had gathered to stop the coming offensive. Elena reached the civilian detention area as emergency lights bathed the corridors in red. The sound of pursuing soldiers grew louder behind her, but she had committed to this course of action. She burst through the door to find 37 civilians packed into a space meant for half that number. Mothers clutched their children while elderly men and women sat against the walls, their faces showing the exhaustion of prolonged captivity. "Listen to me," Elena called out in the local dialect, which she had learned during her deployment. "I am a soldier here to help you. We have very little time." A woman holding a baby stepped forward. Her name was Mira, and she spoke for the group. "They told us we would be released if we cooperated. Are you saying they lied?" Elena nodded grimly. "I have seen their plans. You are not going home, but I can get you out of here if you trust me and follow my instructions exactly." The sound of boots in the corridor was getting closer. Elena quickly explained her plan. The facility had an old drainage system that connected to a river outside the compound. She had memorized the layout from maintenance diagrams in the communications center. It would be dangerous, especially for the children and elderly, but it was their only chance. "The tunnels are narrow and partially flooded," Elena explained. "Some of you may not make it, but if you stay here, None of you will survive what they have planned. Mira translated for those who didn't understand Elena's dialect. The decision was unanimous. They would rather die trying to escape than wait for whatever fate their captors had planned. Elena used the stolen access card to unlock the detention room doors. She led the group through a service corridor toward the maintenance area, where the drainage tunnels began. Behind them, she could hear soldiers searching other parts of the building. It would not be long before they traced her route. The entrance to the drainage system was protected by a heavy metal grate. Elena used tools from the maintenance room to break the lock, but the noise echoed through the tunnels. Anyone following would know exactly where they had gone. The tunnel splits in 3 directions after about 200 meters. Elena explained to Mira. Take the middle passage. It leads to the river. Do not stop for anything or anyone. When you reach the water, follow it downstream for 1 kilometer. There is a village there where you can find help. Mira grabbed Elena's arm. You are not coming with us? Elena shook her head. Someone needs to delay the pursuit. Give your people the head start they need. Before anyone could argue, Elena pushed the first person into the tunnel. One by one, the civilians disappeared into the darkness. The children went first, helped by the adults. The elderly moved slowly but with determination. Mira and her baby went last, pausing to look back at Elena. Thank you, she whispered. Elena sealed the grate behind them and began setting up her defense. She had 1 rifle with limited ammunition, plus the sidearm taken from the guard. The maintenance area had multiple entry points, but she could use that to her advantage by moving between positions. The first soldiers arrived within minutes. Elena was ready for them. Her first shot dropped the lead man before he could fully enter the room. The others took cover, calling for reinforcements. Elena used their caution against them, moving to different positions and making them think she had more people helping her. For 20 minutes, Elena held off an entire squad while the civilians made their escape through the drainage tunnels. She used every trick she had learned in urban combat training, creating confusion with misdirection and precise shooting. When her rifle ammunition ran out, she switched to the sidearm. Commander Kozlov finally arrived with additional troops. He called out to her from the corridor. Sniper, you cannot escape. Surrender now and I will ensure you are treated according to international conventions. Elena knew he was lying. After her escape attempt and the intelligence she had undoubtedly seen, they would never risk keeping her alive. But she had accomplished her mission. The civilians had a chance now, and the memory card in her boot contained information that could save hundreds of Allied soldiers. I have a counteroffer, Elena called back. Let me walk out of here and I will not tell the world what you are doing to innocent people. Kozlov laughed. You are in no position to make demands. But I admire your spirit. It will be a shame to waste such talent. The final assault came from 3 directions simultaneously. Elena fought until her last bullet was gone, then used improvised weapons from the maintenance equipment. She managed to disable 2 more soldiers before they finally overwhelmed her position. This time, her captivity was different. Kozlov was furious about the civilian escape and the security breach. Elena was moved to a deeper level of the facility, to a cell with no windows and constant bright lighting. Guards checked on her every 15 minutes and she was kept in restraints most of the time. The interrogations became brutal. They wanted to know what intelligence she had accessed and whether she had managed to communicate with Allied forces. Elena endured techniques designed to break her mentally and physically, but she held on to one crucial secret. The memory card hidden in her boot had not been discovered. During her 2nd month in the maximum security cell, Elena overheard conversations between guards that revealed crucial information. The major offensive against Allied positions was scheduled to begin in 3 weeks. The intelligence she had gathered was even more important now, but she had no way to communicate it to her people. Elena began to plan once more. This facility was more secure, but it also had weaknesses. The constant bright lighting meant guards relied heavily on their night vision equipment when moving through darker areas. The restraints were checked regularly, but there were brief windows during mealtimes when her hands were free. She also noticed that the facility's power systems were vulnerable. Twice during her confinement, power fluctuations had caused brief blackouts. If she could create a larger electrical failure, it might provide the chaos needed for an escape attempt. Elena began working on a new plan, one that would require perfect timing and tremendous risk. She knew that her chances of survival were minimal, But the intelligence about the coming offensive was too important to die with her. As she lay in her cell, Elena thought about her team and wondered if they were still alive. She hoped Morrison had received some kind of promotion for successfully extracting his people from the factory district. She thought about the civilians she had helped escape and prayed they had reached safety. Most of all, Elena thought about the upcoming battle that only she knew about. Hundreds of Allied soldiers were going to walk into a carefully prepared trap unless someone warned them. The weight of that knowledge pressed down on her like a physical force. Elena closed her eyes and began mentally rehearsing her new escape plan. She would get one chance, maybe two at most. Everything depended on her ability to endure until the right moment presented itself. Outside her cell, Commander Kozlov was preparing for his greatest victory. He had no idea that his most dangerous prisoner was far from broken, and that Elena Volkov was planning something that would change the course of the entire conflict. Elena's opportunity came during her 14th week of captivity, when a massive storm struck the region. Lightning repeatedly hit the facility's power grid, causing multiple blackouts throughout the night. During one particularly long power failure, Elena heard explosions in the distance and realized that Allied forces were conducting raids on nearby enemy positions. The timing was perfect. With the facility's security systems compromised by the electrical problems and guard attention focused on the external threat, Elena put her escape plan into motion. She had spent weeks loosening a metal bracket on her cell's ventilation grate, using a small piece of concrete she had hidden in her shoe. When the next blackout occurred, Elena quickly removed the loosened grate and squeezed into the ventilation shaft. The space was barely large enough for her body, but she had lost significant weight during her imprisonment. She crawled through the narrow passages, following a route she had memorized from maintenance blueprints she had studied months earlier. The ventilation system led to the facility's power distribution center. Elena's plan was risky but simple. Create a massive electrical failure that would disable security systems and communication equipment, giving her cover to escape while preventing the enemy from coordinating their offensive plans. She reached the power center, just as another lightning strike illuminated the room through a small window. Elena quickly located the main distribution panels and began systematically damaging critical components. She used pieces of metal debris to create short circuits that would cascade through the entire electrical grid. The resulting explosion knocked Elena unconscious for several minutes. When she regained awareness, the entire facility was in darkness except for emergency lighting. Alarms were blaring, but the backup communication systems had also been damaged in the electrical failure. Elena retrieved the memory card from her boot and located a computer terminal that was still functioning on emergency power. She quickly uploaded the intelligence data to a secured Allied communication channel she had memorized. The transmission would take several minutes to complete, time she might not have. While the data uploaded, Elena gathered weapons and equipment from a security station. She found her original sniper rifle, which had been kept as a trophy by Commander Kozlov. The familiar weight of the weapon in her hands felt like reuniting with an old friend. Guard teams were systematically searching the facility by flashlight and emergency lighting. Elena could hear them calling out coordinates and room numbers as they tried to locate her. She had perhaps 10 minutes before they reached the power center. The data transmission completed just as the first search team reached her corridor. Elena deleted all traces of the upload and destroyed the computer terminal with a thermite grenade she had found in the security station. Whatever happened to her now, Allied forces would receive warning about the planned offensive. Elena made her way toward the facility's vehicle depot through maintenance corridors and service tunnels. She could hear search teams behind her, but the darkness and her knowledge of the building layout gave her crucial advantages. Her military training had included extensive practice in night operations. At the depot, Elena found several vehicles, including motorcycles that would be perfect for a rapid escape. As she attempted to start one of the bikes, overhead lights suddenly blazed to life. The facility's backup generators had finally restored partial power to critical systems. Commander Kozlov appeared in the depot entrance with a squad of soldiers. His face showed a mixture of rage and grudging admiration. "You have caused considerable trouble, sniper. But this ends now." Elena raised her hand slowly, appearing to surrender, but she had palmed a fragmentation grenade during her weapon gathering. "Commander, before you capture me again, there is something you should know." Kozlov stepped closer, confident that his men had her surrounded. "What could you possibly tell me that would matter now?" Elena smiled coldly. "Your offensive plans are worthless. Allied forces know everything about your troop movements, supply routes, and target priorities. They received detailed intelligence 20 minutes ago." The color drained from Kozlov's face. "You are lying. Our communication systems were down." "Not Allied systems," Elena replied. She released the grenade safety pin while keeping the trigger lever pressed. "You trained me too well. I learned to adapt and overcome." Elena dove behind a vehicle as she released the grenade. The explosion scattered the search team and gave her the chaos she needed to reach the motorcycle. She kicked the engine to life and accelerated toward the depot's exit, weaving between concrete pillars as bullets sparked off the walls around her. The facility's main gate was heavily fortified, but Elena had observed patrol patterns during her earlier imprisonment. She knew there was a weak point in the perimeter fence where maintenance crews accessed external power lines. The motorcycle's powerful engine carried her across the compound's open areas, faster than pursuing guards could follow on foot. Elena crashed through the perimeter fence at the weak point she had identified. The impact threw her from the motorcycle, but she rolled with the fall and came up running. Behind her, the facility erupted in searchlight beams as every available guard joined the pursuit. She reached the tree line as the first pursuit vehicles emerged from the compound. Elena's months of captivity had weakened her physically, but her determination drove her forward through the dense forest. She knew the general direction to Allied positions from intelligence briefings she had memorized before her original capture. The pursuit continued through the night. Elena could hear vehicles on nearby roads and helicopters searching overhead. But the storm provided natural cover, and her training in evasion techniques served her well. She moved carefully through the woods, avoiding main trails and using stream beds to mask her tracks. By dawn, Elena estimated she had covered nearly 20 kilometers. Her body was exhausted, but she could see smoke in the distance that suggested Allied positions. She had to reach friendly forces before enemy search teams located her. Elena approached what appeared to be an Allied checkpoint, but something felt wrong. The soldiers' equipment looked different, and their positioning seemed too exposed for a proper defensive position. As she got closer, she realized she had stumbled onto an advance enemy patrol that was preparing to attack Allied positions. There were 6 soldiers setting up a heavy machine gun position overlooking a valley where Elena could see Allied vehicles moving. If this patrol succeeded in their ambush, dozens of her people would die. Elena was exhausted, barely armed and outnumbered, but she could not let this attack proceed. She circled around the patrol's position and set up an improvised sniper's nest using her recovered rifle. From her elevated position, Elena could see the entire enemy team and most of the valley below. Allied vehicles were moving directly into the ambush zone. Elena had 1 magazine of ammunition and no backup. She would have to make every shot count, and she would have to do it quickly before the enemy patrol detected her position. The weight of her rifle felt reassuring in her hands as she calculated ranges and wind conditions. Taking a deep breath, Elena began the engagement that would announce her return to the war. Her first shot disabled the machine gunner before he could open fire on the Allied convoy. Her second shot eliminated the patrol leader who was reaching for his radio. The remaining 4 soldiers scattered for cover, trying to locate Elena's position. But she was already moving, using techniques she had perfected during months of combat operations. Each shot was precise, each movement calculated to maximize her advantage. Within 3 minutes, the enemy patrol was neutralized. Elena immediately began signaling to the Allied convoy below, using hand signals and reflected sunlight to identify herself as a friendly operator. After months of captivity and a harrowing escape, she was finally returning to her own people. As Allied soldiers climbed the hill toward her position, Elena allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had not only escaped from an impossible situation, but had also delivered critical intelligence about enemy plans. The war was far from over, but she had given her side a crucial advantage. Commander Morrison was among the soldiers who reached her position. His face showed shock and joy at seeing her alive. "Ghost, we thought you were dead. How did you?" Elena handed him the rifle and managed a tired smile. "I had some unfinished business to take care of, but I am ready to get back to work." The Allied command bunker buzzed with activity. as intelligence officers analyzed the data Elena had transmitted during her escape. General Patterson, the theater commander, studied satellite images while Elena provided detailed briefings about everything she had observed during her captivity. Her intelligence had already prevented 3 planned enemy attacks, saving hundreds of Allied lives. The offensive they are planning is larger than anything we have faced, Elena explained to the assembled officers. They have been stockpiling weapons and equipment for months. The civilian prisoners were going to be used as human shields during their advance on our main bases. Morrison sat beside Elena during the briefing, still amazed that she had survived her ordeal. The medical team had cleared her for duty despite her weight loss and the obvious signs of her harsh treatment. Elena had insisted on returning to active service immediately, claiming that she knew enemy tactics better than anyone else. General Patterson leaned forward at the briefing table. According to your intelligence, they plan to attack simultaneously from 3 directions. Our current defensive positions would be overwhelmed. Elena nodded. But there is something else. Commander Kozlov is personally leading this offensive. He sees it as his chance for promotion and recognition. That makes him dangerous but also predictable. He will want to be present for the final victory. Over the next week, Allied forces implemented a new defensive strategy based on Elena's intelligence. Instead of waiting for the attack at their main bases, they would set up a trap in the valley between 2 mountain ridges. The enemy would find what appeared to be a vulnerable Allied position, but it would actually be a carefully prepared killing ground. Elena volunteered for the most dangerous part of the plan. She would position herself deep in enemy territory, behind their advancing forces. When the battle began, she would target key commanders and communication personnel, disrupting their coordination while the main Allied force engaged from the front. You have already done enough, Morrison told her privately. Let someone else take this mission. Elena checked her rifle for the 100th time. They trained me during those months in captivity. They made me harder, more focused. I know how they think now, how they operate. This is my mission. The night before the operation, Elena visited the camp where rescued civilians were staying. Mira approached her with her baby, now healthy and safe. My daughter will grow up free because of what you did, she said. We named her Elena in your honor. Elena felt a rare moment of emotion as she held the baby who bore her name. All the suffering, all the pain of her captivity, seemed worthwhile when she saw the faces of the people she had helped save. These were the lives that gave meaning to her mission. 2 days later, enemy forces began their advance exactly as Elena's intelligence had predicted. Kozlov led a massive force of over 2,000 soldiers, supported by armored vehicles and artillery. They moved through the mountain passes with confidence, believing they were about to deliver a crushing blow to Allied resistance. Elena was already in position on a ridge overlooking their route of advance. She had been moving through enemy territory for 36 hours, avoiding patrols and observation posts. Her sniper's nest was perfectly concealed among the rocks with multiple escape routes prepared. Through her scope, Elena watched the enemy column advance. She could see Kozlov in his command vehicle, studying maps and coordinating with his subordinates. For a moment she considered taking the shot that would end his participation in the war. But her mission required patience and precise timing. The Allied deception was working perfectly. Enemy reconnaissance reported a small, poorly defended Allied position in the valley ahead. Kozlov ordered his forces to increase their advance speed, eager to overwhelm what he believed was a desperate attempt at defense. Elena transmitted regular position reports to Allied command, tracking the enemy advance and confirming target priorities. When the main battle began, her job would be to eliminate specific high-value targets that had been identified during her briefings. As the sun reached its peak, the enemy force crested the final ridge overlooking the valley. Below them, Allied positions appeared vulnerable and undermanned. Kozlov ordered the attack to begin, expecting to overrun the defenses within an hour. The trap was sprung with devastating effect. What had appeared to be a small Allied force was actually the forward element of a much larger defensive position. Hidden artillery positions opened fire simultaneously, bracketing the enemy advance with precise barrages. Elena began her own engagement as the main battle erupted below. Her first target was the enemy communications officer, whose death would prevent coordination between different attack groups. Her second shot eliminated an artillery spotter who was calling fire missions against Allied positions. Through her scope, Elena could see the confusion spreading through enemy ranks as their carefully planned attack dissolved into chaos. But Kozlov was adapting quickly, reorganizing his forces and attempting to coordinate a fighting withdrawal to more defensible positions. Elena would not let him escape again. She adjusted her position and acquired Kozlov as a target. He was approximately 800 meters away, partially concealed behind his command vehicle. The shot would be difficult but not impossible for someone with her skills. As Elena prepared to fire, she noticed movement on her flanks. Enemy soldiers were climbing toward her position, probably sent by Kozlov when he realized there was a sniper disrupting his communications. Elena had perhaps 2 minutes before they reached her nest. She made a decision that defined her character. Instead of taking the safer shot at Kozlov from her current position, Elena moved to a more exposed location that would give her a clear line of sight. The enemy soldiers would reach her faster, but her shot would be guaranteed. Elena settled into her new position and acquired Kozlov in her crosshairs. He was shouting orders to his staff, trying desperately to salvage his offensive. Through her scope, Elena could see the frustration and growing panic on his face as his carefully planned attack crumbled around him. The shot was perfect. 800 meters through mountain air with a slight crosswind that Elena compensated for instinctively. Kozlov fell as his staff scattered for cover, leaving the enemy force without their primary commander during the most critical phase of the battle. Enemy soldiers reached Elena's position within seconds of her shot. But she was already moving, using the chaos of the main battle to mask her withdrawal. She had accomplished her primary mission. The enemy offensive was broken and their command structure was devastated. Elena made her way toward Allied lines as the battle raged around her. Enemy forces were retreating in disarray, their coordinated offensive completely shattered. Without Kozlov's leadership, individual unit commanders were making independent decisions, creating gaps in their defensive lines that Allied forces exploited ruthlessly. The retreat became a rout as Allied air support arrived to hammer the fleeing enemy columns. Elena watched from a safe distance as months of enemy planning and preparation were destroyed in a single afternoon. The intelligence she had gathered during her captivity had not only saved Allied lives but had turned a potential disaster into a decisive victory. Morrison found Elena at the extraction point as planned. She was exhausted but satisfied, knowing that her mission had been completed successfully. The enemy offensive that should have overrun Allied positions had instead resulted in the destruction of their largest concentrated force in the region. Ghost. That was the finest piece of military intelligence work I have ever seen, Morrison said as they watched enemy prisoners being processed. Command wants to put you in for the highest decorations. Elena shook her head. The real victory was getting those civilians out. Everything else was just finishing the job. As they walked back toward Allied lines, Elena reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. Months of captivity and torture had tested her beyond anything she had experienced, but they had also given her the knowledge needed to strike back decisively. The war would continue, but the enemy's ability to conduct major offensive operations had been severely damaged. More importantly, Elena had proven that no matter how dire the circumstances, a single determined soldier could change the course of history through courage, intelligence, and unwavering commitment to protecting innocent lives. Elena looked back once at the battlefield where Kozlov had fallen, then turned toward the future. There would be other missions, other challenges, but she faced them with the confidence of someone who had endured the worst and emerged stronger. The girl who had been left behind was gone, replaced by a warrior who had returned to change everything. 6 months after the decisive battle in the valley, Elena stood before a gathering of military officials and civilians in the capital city. The ceremony was meant to honor her service, but she felt uncomfortable with the attention. The medals and speeches seemed less important than the letter she had received that morning from Mira, the woman whose baby now bore Elena's name. General Patterson read from the citation, "For extraordinary heroism in the face of enemy capture, providing intelligence that prevented massive Allied casualties, and single-handedly disrupting enemy command during a critical battle." The words felt hollow to Elena, who knew that real heroism was measured in lives saved rather than enemies defeated. After the ceremony, Elena met privately with Morrison, who had been promoted to colonel following the successful defense operation. They sat in his office reviewing reports from the region where the battle had taken place. The enemy had never recovered from their losses, and civilian populations were slowly returning to their homes. "The intelligence services want you for special operations," Morrison told her. "Deep cover work, high-value target elimination. They say you have proven abilities that make you invaluable for that kind of mission." Elena considered the offer carefully. Part of her was tempted by the challenge and the opportunity to strike directly at enemy leadership. But her experiences during captivity had changed her perspective on warfare and her role as a soldier. "I want to train others," she said finally. "Teach them what I learned about survival, intelligence gathering, and protecting civilian populations. The war taught me that our real mission is not just defeating enemies, but ensuring that people like Mira and her daughter can live in peace." Morrison smiled. "I thought you might say that. There is actually a perfect assignment waiting for you. The military is establishing a new training facility for special operations personnel. They need someone with real experience to develop the curriculum." Elena accepted the position immediately. Within a month, she was working with military educators to create training programs that emphasized not just combat skills, but also the ethical responsibilities that came with military power. Her own experiences provided powerful examples of how soldiers could make decisions that protected innocent lives even under extreme circumstances. The training facility became renowned for producing exceptional special operations personnel who understood that true military success was measured by the civilian lives protected rather than just the enemies defeated. Elena's methods were unconventional, but they produced soldiers who thought strategically about the human consequences of their actions. During her second year as an instructor, Elena received an unexpected visitor. Commander Kozlov, who had survived his wound and been captured during the retreat, requested a meeting with her. He was being held in a prisoner of war camp pending war crimes trials, but he had specifically asked to speak with the sniper who had ended his offensive. Elena agreed to the meeting, curious about what the man who had been her captor might want to say. They met in a secured room at the detention facility, with guards present for security. Kozlov looked older and worn down by his months in captivity. "I wanted to understand how you did it," he said without preamble. "How you turned captivity into victory. How you gathered intelligence while appearing broken. How you escaped from a maximum security facility." Elena studied his face carefully. "You are asking the wrong questions. The real question is why you thought targeting civilians would bring you victory." Kozlov was silent for a moment. "I followed orders. I did what military doctrine required." "No," Elena replied firmly. "You made choices. Every day, in every situation, you chose to treat prisoners harshly, to threaten innocent people, to use fear as a weapon. Those were your decisions, not orders from above." The conversation continued for nearly an hour. Elena found herself explaining not just her tactical methods, but the moral framework that had guided her decisions during the darkest moments of her captivity. She realized that even enemy commanders could learn from understanding the principles that separated professional soldiers from mere combatants. When the meeting ended, Kozlov offered her something unexpected. "I have information about other facilities like the one where you were held. Locations where civilians are still being detained illegally. I will provide this intelligence in exchange for nothing, as an acknowledgement that your methods were superior to mine." Elena accepted the information and passed it immediately to Allied intelligence services. Within weeks, coordinated operations freed over 300 civilian prisoners from multiple detention facilities. The intelligence Kozlov provided was accurate and detailed, suggesting that their conversation had genuinely affected his perspective. Years later, Elena continued her work training special operations personnel, while also serving as a consultant on prisoner treatment and civilian protection protocols. Her methods became standard practice throughout Allied forces, emphasizing the strategic value of maintaining moral authority even during the most challenging combat situations. Elena often thought about the chain of events that had led from her capture at the factory district to her current role, shaping military doctrine. The months of captivity that could have broken her had instead forged her into something stronger and more focused than she had ever been as a conventional soldier. The girl who had volunteered to stay behind and by time for her teammates had evolved into a woman who understood that true military victory required protecting the innocent, while defeating those who threatened them. Her story became a case study in military academies. But Elena knew that the real measure of her success was not in the textbooks. It was in the letters she received from people like Mira, whose daughter was now old enough to ask about the soldier she had been named after. It was in the reports of special operations teams who used her methods to complete missions while minimizing civilian casualties. It was in the knowledge that her ordeal had created something valuable that would protect others long after her own service ended. Elena remained active in military service for many years, eventually retiring with the rank of colonel and a reputation as one of the most effective special operations trainers in military history. But she never forgot the lessons learned during those dark months of captivity, that true strength came not from the ability to endure suffering, but from the determination to ensure that others would not have to endure it. The sniper girl who had been left behind had returned to change not just the course of a single battle, but the entire approach to military operations that balanced tactical success with moral responsibility. Her legacy lived on in every soldier who chose to protect the innocent, even when it meant accepting greater personal risk. In her final report before retirement, Elena wrote, "Military victory without moral authority is temporary, but when soldiers fight to protect rather than merely to destroy, they create victories that endure long after the guns fall silent." These words became the motto of the training facility she had built, ensuring that future generations of soldiers would understand the true meaning of military service.